Today, friends, I would like to talk about the Russian language in Ukraine. Why I personally speak Russian, why Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine, is predominantly Russian-speaking, and whether speaking Russian in Ukraine means you are politically pro-Russia. I would also like to discuss how certain political narratives are trying to portray Russian as a sort of a shameful language, the language of the Russian imperial state, the terrorist, the aggressor. So people pour a lot of dirt on this language these days. But the whole story is much more complicated than it looks. And the first thing I would like to explain from both linguistic and historical perspective is that there are three languages, three Slavic languages, Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian, and they all come from the same ancestor called Old East Slavic. These three languages belong to a specific linguistic group called East Slavic, and no other Slavic language is part of this group. Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian are more mutually understandable compared to other Slavic languages. And this is the reason they are in the same linguistic group, and this is a direct consequence of evolving from that mutual ancestor. And during this war, I keep hearing people say that Russian sounds like crap, that everything in Russian was stolen, and people try to distance Russian from Ukrainian for political reasons. But linguistic is a very stubborn thing, and it doesn't really care about our feelings and political situation. And if we look at grammar, vocabulary, sentence structure, the Cyrillic alphabet which both Russian and Ukrainian use, then it becomes very clear that these languages are similar, and that's exactly why linguists place them in the same branch, East Slavic. But it doesn't mean, though, that if you are a Russian speaker, for example, like myself, you can start speaking Ukrainian all of a sudden fluently and beautifully. No, you still have to put in a lot of effort to master your Ukrainian. When Kharkiv was founded in the 17th century, neither modern Ukrainian nor modern Russian existed as distinct languages, and the local population here spoke Ruthenian, the ancestor of modern Ukrainian. Yes, it's a little bit confusing, but it's interesting that later, when Kharkiv became part of the Russian Empire, this language, Ruthenian, was referred to as Little Russian, and its speakers were called Little Russians. This was the terminology that the Russian Empire used. And when I started working on this video, I thought that would be really cool to check out some archival materials and find out Kharkiv's ethnic makeup during different periods of time, and what languages were spoken, and how this process of Russification happened. So the best place to do this kind of research is the Kharkiv State Scientific Library. We're standing right near it. It's been collecting books, newspapers, records in the 19th century. It is one of the oldest and largest libraries in Ukraine. So guys, let's go inside. Let's try to find some statistics books, encyclopedias, dictionaries to find information about the people who lived here and what language was spoken during different periods of the city's history. Actually, here we can see a plaque and we can read the information, and I didn't lie to you guys. It is the oldest and second largest library in Ukraine, the oldest. Oh my gosh. And it was opened in 1801. And the building designed in the Renaissance style. So it's a historical building. The library's collection holds over 7 million items, and you can find almost anything you want about Kharkiv here. The catalog is still on paper cards, it hasn't been digitized, so you really get that old school feeling with the wooden drawers and handwritten cards. I went straight for a famous German encyclopedia that was adapted and expanded specifically for the Russian Empire, Brockhaus and de Fron. This edition was printed in St. Petersburg in 1803 in old pre-revolutionary Russian spelling, and it includes detailed information about cities and regions of the former empire, including Kharkiv. According to the book, in 1801, Kharkiv's population was almost 200,000 people. 60% Great Russians, 29.2 Little Russians, 6.1 Jews, and 1% Poles. Of course, we can't know how accurate these numbers were. Some Ukrainians, then called Little Russians, may have been recorded as Russians for various reasons, but officially, ethnic Russians were the largest group in Kharkiv. I found something really interesting and I printed out all the information because, guys, I will explain everything at home because here you have to be quiet and it's freezing here. There is no heating. So let's go back home and I'll share with you what I found. According to the encyclopedia that we found in the library, in the early 20th century, Great Russians or simply Russians dominated in Kharkiv. To be honest, I'm very skeptical about the accuracy of these statistics because I know that some Russian-speaking Ukrainians could have been recorded as Russians, but nevertheless, let's also take a look at a book called Kharkovsky Sbornik, which is Kharkiv collection. It has very interesting info about the language the people spoke here in Kharkiv 200 years ago. The native residents of Kharkiv, by origin and language, were Little Russians. At least the urban commoners and peasants still spoke the pure Little Russian dialect in the early 1830s. But little by little, due to the influx of Great Russians, especially merchants, the Little Russian dialect began to decline, so that at present it's difficult to recognize the native residents as Little Russians. It's a well-known fact that ethnic Russians is the largest minority in Ukraine, but I never really knew how they were spread across the country. Both books show that there have been a Russian presence in Kharkiv for a long time, and Russians started moving here actively during the 19th century as Kharkiv grew and developed. Many ethnic Ukrainians adopted Russian because it was the main language in both Russian Empire and later the USSR. So obviously, it wasn't some in-depth research, but from what I gathered, the language shift was a gradual process during the 19th century, and by 20th century, Kharkiv was already a Russian-speaking city. It's getting a little bit dark, and as we're heading home, guys, I want to answer the question, why do I continue speaking Russian in Ukraine when the government of Ukraine encourages people to switch to Ukrainian? And the first thing is that the government of Ukraine is largely Russian speaking itself. Take, for example, the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. He's a native Russian speaker. He only started using Ukrainian when he realized that he became president. Part of his inauguration speech was delivered in Russian because it was that challenging for him to deliver the whole speech in Ukrainian. And I know that he hired a personal tutor, so it's good for him. But generally speaking, guys, the government of Ukraine more discourages me than encourages. But seriously though, I have very practical reasons. I am not bilingual, so the Russian language is the only language I can use effortlessly. This language was passed on me by my parents when I was a kid. I do respect my parents and I love my first language, and basically I invested my entire life into this language. You know, I always wanted to sound like an educated and articulate woman. And my parents made me read books, I learned vocabulary. I would like to think that it helped me. So now my command of Russian is significantly stronger than my command of Ukrainian. I basically only studied Ukrainian at school. I can use it, but if I switch to this language now, I would make some mistakes. I would sound with an accent. I would definitely use limited vocabulary. So I am not capable of using this language, you know, in a sophisticated way. And I would like to think that I can use Russian in this way, and maybe even I can sound, you know, witty in Russian, make some jokes. So this is just my language. Some might say, well, you live in Ukraine, so work on your Ukrainian to master it. But I have an answer to this question. I simply lack motivation. Because what would Ukrainian language give me? Maybe better job opportunities? Unfortunately not. Salaries in Ukraine, guys, are ridiculously low. Doing this English-speaking YouTube gives me a better salary than what is considered a good salary in Ukraine. So I'm far more motivated to work on my English. The Russian language is also an international language, and for example, when I travel abroad, I can go to a museum and I can always ask for an audio guide in Russian, for example, and in English. Both Russian and English are international languages that give you access to wider information. So don't want to sound harsh on Ukrainian. I like the Ukrainian language, but we live in a capitalist world. We need to survive, and the competition is key. I think that Ukrainian is not competitive compared to English for me and compared to my first language. So guys, I hope this video gave you some insights about the language situation. If you liked it, you can consider supporting this channel by buying me a coffee. And of course, I'll see you very soon from Kharkiv again. Bye guys!